Cyborg Assassin 1, Chapter 7. After her 10th failure of infiltrating the communist complex, Oshun was ready to stop playing. She returned to the circle with her glum-eyed teenage comrades, where they waited for Finley to talk. He smiled and beat out a tune on his hoverboard, then strolled around the interior. "None of you passed today." He held up a finger and twirled around on the spot. Oshun stared at his back. "But don't fret, it's merely your first day. Questions?" The usual 3 talkative teenagers shot their hands up. Finley nodded at the Georgian boy, Chonglin. The Georgian boy's pudgy cheeks sagged beside his downturned mouth. "Aren't we going to eat?" "There's no need to. Did you forget your bodies are sleeping in cryo-sponge? The gas feeds you." "I'd like to taste something. I haven't eaten for hours." "Are you hungry?" "No, but I wouldn't mind eating something." "That explains why you're so fat," a ginger boy yelled. The surrounding boys chuckled and hooted. Finley stormed over to the rude boy. He leaned down and grabbed his collar, then lifted him off the ground. Oshun rubbed her eyes as if to reaffirm what she was seeing. So strong. The other kid must have been a couple of years older than him. He surely weighed 5 kilograms more. "Oh yeah, we're in a similar situation." The ginger boy's eyes bulged as he glanced at his companions. Their gazes darted away. Finley snarled. "We won't have any bullying here." He shook him with undeniable strength. "Agree?" "Yeah," he blubbered. "Say sorry to Chonglin." "Sorry, Chonglin." Finley lowered him and patted his head. "Good." He examined the soldiers. "And let that be a lesson to you all. Wherever you go, I can see. Everything's recorded. I'm always watching." He stalked towards Chonglin. "We'll have a virtual reality feast, seeing as spirits are low today." Excited whispers hummed. "What is your favourite food?" Chonglin swallowed and straightened his shirt. "Southwest Maozong." "Then it shall be." Someone moaned. "I don't like Georgian food." "I bet you've never tasted Southwest Maozong food," Chonglin said. "It all tastes the same to me," someone else said. Chonglin smashed his fist on the floor, then waved it from the pane. "I'm sick of you all outside people thinking you know everything about Maozong." Oshun blanched. "Outside people? What does that even mean?" "It's a big country with many kinds of cuisine. Don't you even understand that 99% of the food from my ancestors' homelands is never even eaten across the Alliance? That's right." He stuck his nose in the air and glared at the stars with narrowed eyes. "You guys only get to try the sweet shit from a tiny seaport in the southeast. That's all the restaurants across 7 solar systems serve up for outside people." Yeah, someone called out. He jumped to his feet and clenched his fists. "It's true, I tell you. And you realise why? Politics. So just live in your ignorance about my country's culinary variety and unique cultures, and you go That's why we're having a banquet, Chonglin." Finley put his hand on his shoulder. "We can enjoy some Maozong food we never knew about." Oshun's mouth fell open. She'd seen no one get so worked up about food before. Perhaps he'd suffered racism too. She'd speak to him about it when she got the chance and try to make friends. Finley sat beside Chonglin and opened an airsphere around them. They hadn't set it on private, and Oshun peered at the varied scenes in small visual boxes. Chonglin pointed at one, and the dark outdoors turned into a lively Maozong restaurant. Groups of 10 edged 20 round tables. Oshun sat with 9 of the youngest teenage girls, but no one seemed interested in talking to her as they gossiped about popular music, famous actors and makeup. Different girls on her table liked individual dishes, but Oshun didn't enjoy any of them. The savoury food, full of peppercorns and red chilies, burned her mouth and numbed her tongue. The girls continued to gossip as if she wasn't there. One peach-skinned Papsnan with pink eyes and curls kept glancing at her, but when Oshun offered her a smile, she spun and talked to someone else. A thickness in Oshun's throat signalled the onset of tears. Would she ever make a friend? She was so young in comparison. When the desserts arrived, she swung the table's centre circle to grab as many as she could. Coconut sago pudding, deep-fried bananas and glutinous rice cakes with colourful and delicious fillings tasted terrific. The aromatic flavours cheered her mood, and she binged on it, trying to ignore how lonely she felt. As she swallowed, she forced her threatening tears into her stomach with the sweet treats. "Hey, Oshun," a gentle voice said. Oshun turned to look at Fran, the Gothic, smiling at her. Fran's bobbed haircut was as straight as black paper, and her makeup smudged around her eyes. Was her Sax skin naturally that pale, or did she put white makeup on it? Is everyone here ignoring you? Heat crept across Oshun's cheeks and she gazed at her lap. Come, join me. So what if you're 7 years younger? We can be friends. Tears made Oshun's breath catch in her lungs as Fran took her hand and drew her aside towards her table. But there weren't any spaces. Come on, Fran said. We both have skinny asses. Let's share a seat. Oshun and Fran shared a plate too before a virtual server brought them a spare pair of chopsticks and a new bowl. Fran asked Oshun so many questions until she learned everything about her. Do you get to see colours in the simulations? Fran asked. Yes. Fran wrinkled her nose. I wish I did, but I'm Sax. I must wear light intensifying glasses when we reach Arceus. Finley says we must get used to it now. I don't understand why everyone says the original Renidians and Menidians came from Arceus. Oshun sucked plain noodles which she'd ordered from the server. Why claim that? Everyone knows Renidians and Menidians only occupied the planet after a meteor knocked it so hard that the oxygen levels decreased enough for humans to live there. So where do you expect your ancestors came from? I'm not sure. Exactly. No one does. Many scientists think they moved from another red dwarf system across the barrier. But the boundaries are impenetrable. Only in theory. Oshun frowned. No, many space vessels which tried to cross appeared on the other side of Plan 8 with scrambled minds. That's what they say. What, you think it's a conspiracy? Who knows? Why can't Renidians come from a white sun world? Because of your developed eye biology. But it's developed for a white sun world too. Fran shrugged and took a huge bite of her steamed bun and licked the sticky peanut fillings from her lips. She chewed quickly and swallowed with green tea. At least you haven't got to cover your eyes with light-enhancing glasses. I won't be able to identify enough without them. After soy milkshakes, Finley's voice boomed over the conversation. Back to VR training. A collective whine took over the hall. Choose your partners. Each pair will have a VR game with a personal trainer. Can't we sleep? Someone shouted from the end of the restaurant. Finley let out a bark of laughter. You're already asleep. He shrugged. Anyone feel tired? The teenagers mumbled and shook their heads as the tables, meals and complex vanished, replaced with the blackness of concrete under space. Choose your partners. Oshun turned to eye Fran, but she had already disappeared. She scanned the crowds for her. Nowhere. Relief swept through Oshun when a nervous-looking boy teen walked towards her. Hi, Oshun said. He walked straight past her. She spotted Chonglin with his face in his hands, so approached him. Chonling, would you like to train with me? He raised his eyebrows with a questioning gaze when he searched around, but when he looked down and noticed Oshun, those eyes turned cold. Why would I want to train with a baby? He turned on his heel and found another teenager his age. Oshun's heartbeat seemed to slow as her mouth opened and no words came out. Don't worry, Oshun. Finley strolled towards her. I'll train you, and you'll get better than those losers within no time. Oshun reflected on the one-to-one training she had received from Finley and didn't understand how she disliked him so much on their initial meeting. Not only was he kind-hearted, but he had also instructed her more than anyone else could. Perhaps her loneliness was worth it. She now felt more confident in winning the games. Unlike White Sun humanoids, Oshun didn't have to wear light-intensifying goggles and wouldn't once they arrived on the Red Sun's planet. Good. Nothing to interfere with my focus. She lay on her stomach between two boulders and peered through the laser cannon sniper scope. Following Finley's instructions on targeting, she modified the focus and wheels. The graphic image pattern gave her an exact aiming point on the Renidian and Menidian guards outside the compound where she had lost her last 10 games. From the proximity of the mountain top with a long-range sniper cannon, her confidence increased. She pulled away from the scope in time to spot clouds of dust snaking along a distant road. She repositioned her cannon as Finley had taught her, nice and smooth. Through the sniper scope, she glared at 4 tanks rumbling across the rocky plain. President Isleworth sat in one of those tanks, and if that double agent who Finley told about was driving it and had deactivated the aura shield, her laser would penetrate. She readjusted her target on the first and pulled the trigger. Roar! The short pulse sounded like thunder. Her muscles jerked under her skin as the tank ignited. Boom! She drew in a long breath and aimed at the second, third, and fourth. Roar! 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 Electromagnetic shields unfurled around them, protecting them from the attack. It seemed like her insides were vibrating. She'd only hoped for such an outcome. Had she killed him? That first tank had exploded beyond recognition and, apparently, Isleworth occupied it. But why was the game continuing? Shouldn't she win the game and finish now? Pulse flitting in her neck, she slithered backwards, pulling the heavy cannon until the valley was out of sight. It took most of her power to carry the thing. Couldn't they make these lighter? She slotted it in the special backpack and faltered along the mountain pass. Foreign voices and crunching footsteps made her stop and stare. A group of black and white Beluvians strolled down a meandering footpath. Their thin, straight hair, skinny frames, and enormous black compound eyes gave them away. Posture loosening, she scratched her chin. The game's story must have contained a glitch, or the game writer or designer got it wrong. Beluvians didn't live on this planet. Many ignorant people in the Alliance didn't know the difference between New Belu and Arceus just because their suns weren't yellow. The sound of heavy boots plodded in a third direction, further down in the ever-black woodland. As she held her breath, her eyes bounced about the territory. Nowhere to hide. She scampered along the Beluvians' path. They were far ahead and accessed a moss-covered hatch in the ground. She edged closer. A gruff voice shouted and she twirled. She froze as two soldiers aimed their guns at her. The albino Mayleedian shouted a question. "I don't understand what you're saying. Let me use my translation device." The Raynidian marched towards her, grabbed her by the arm, and then tugged her laser cannon off her shoulder. His eyes widened when he realized the weight of the things, and he foraged inside. His dark forehead beaded with sweat, and he yelled at his companion. When he passed his partner the weapon, the Mayleedian's yellow eyes narrowed. They argued as they pushed her down a rocky path. It was a long and challenging walk. An hour later, they reached a tank and climbed inside. It headed off to an unknown place. Finley had told her that if anyone ever captured her in a game, she must shoot herself in the head to end it, but the men had the gun. When they vacated the tank, they faced the hideout she had tried countless times to enter. She bit one man's arm, but the padding of his uniform was too thick. His companion yanked her hair and yelled something at his friend. The other guy drew a fist back and punched her in the stomach. His partner shouted at him as pain travelled from Oshun's gut up to her chest. Then she curled forward and gagged on nothing, throat and stomach tight. She gasped as they pushed her towards the compound. If they didn't kill her, she'd find another way to die before they tortured her. When the pain in Oshun's stomach subsided, she straightened her back and let the two soldiers push her towards a security gate which segregated that chicken wire fence. They spoke to the security team and nudged her through the clearance gate. They opened a hatch at the side of the small brick building and tugged her down the steps, sticking a gun in her ribcage the entire time. She whirled around and tried to grab the gun, but their strength held her arm still. If only she were able to shoot herself to end the game. They advanced down the passageway. Other soldiers they passed stood to attention, while ordinary citizens, dressed in green, ignored her and bustled here and there. Although infrared bathed the underground facility, Oshun could see as well. What a white sun humanoid would see as black and red she saw in an array of colours. Although much red and black dominated the sky and land above, animals, flowers and people were like those on her white sun world, Nerthus, but patterns existed within the blocks of colour. The passageway widened as she stumbled through a gaping entrance which led into a room lined with cells. Each cage contained one prisoner. They looked to be from all over the Alliance. Red-skinned Mayleedians with long ears, purple-skinned Mayleedians with sleek black hair, Raynidians and Mayleedians like the free people who lived here, and even insect eyes, black and white Beluvians. As the guards pushed her into an empty cell, she raised her eyebrows at the Beluvians in disbelief. At school, her humanities teacher had taught them Beluvians only lived in their solar system and didn't like to mingle with the rest of the Alliance, even though they were the wealthiest trading partner. What about the unrestricted Beluvians she'd seen outside? Why would the computer game designer put them in too? Didn't they understand anything? Just when she was hoping she'd get to keep her translation device, a guard muttered something to his companion and ripped it from her wrist. After their footsteps faded, a black Boluvian man across the passageway caught her eye. He walked up to the bars and pressed his nose through a gap. His enormous black eyes almost touched the bars. He said something in a foreign language and she shrugged. He said something in a different sounding language. Even so, she couldn't understand. He rubbed the frown between his brows and tried again. "Can you speak Mayleedian?" Pressing a palm against her heart, she nodded. "What are you doing here?" "I'm a foreigner. The communists don't like foreigners. Why are you here? You're just a little girl." Her voice jammed and she took in a shaky breath, but her tears wouldn't stop and her torso shook as she tried to hold them with gasps. The only reason she had agreed to go to military school was so Mum might live again. She'd never meant to kill that boy in the army barracks. "It's okay," he said in a soothing voice. "You can tell me." She squinted as she looked inwards. Could she tell the alien the truth? Or should she? Was that a way to win the game? To collaborate with an innocent alien who needed help? But hadn't she already killed Isleworth? "Did you come from that underground place with the other Boluvians?" A deep furrow ran between his gigantic eyes. "How do you know about that?" "I saw them after I assassinated President Isleworth." When he whipped his head from side to glance at the other gaping prisoners, the overhead light reflected across the many small hexagons which made up the surface of his eyes. "You didn't." She nodded slowly. "I did. With a laser cannon." "Are you certain?" A purple-skinned woman let out a laugh. "Who told you to kill the president? Your mother?" It sounded like a sick joke. She was about to laugh, but then remembered Mum had died, or had the government made a clone with a sound memory chip? "They'll kill you, you know." The purple woman reached a hand through the bars and sniffed. "If what you say is true." "I don't care. The sooner they killed her, the better. Then she'd end the simulation and get her reward." Her heart rate picked up when the same two guards returned and took her to a small operating theatre. Her muscles froze as she lay on the operating bed. The doctor opened a case full of stainless steel tools. Some were sharp. When he turned his back, she grabbed a sharp utensil and stabbed it into her heart. As her lungs struggled to breathe, pain radiated from her chest. Game over. Chapter 8, Terrorist. Dave leaned over the edge of his bed, feeling the polished surface of the guitar he'd bought as a surprise for Frankie. When the lad had finished his dump and come outside, Dave smirked. "What's that cheesy grin on your face?" "Cheesy, is it?" "Too right. What are you smiling about?" "Got something for you." "What?" Dave pulled the black beauty out from under the bed. "Figure you could do with a new one." When a look of awe spread across Frankie's face, he knew he'd done the right thing. The lad was talented, he'd give him that. Frankie accepted the instrument and sat on his bed opposite, then started tuning it. "How did you know I can play the guitar?" "Heard you, lad." He winced. "Before the shooting." Frankie's smile fell and his eyes clouded over as he continued fine-tuning each note. "Sorry, didn't want to remind you." "Can't hide from the fact you're a terrorist." "Assassin, not terrorist." "I don't think assassins kill random people. That's a terrorist's job." His throat constricted and he scrubbed a hand over his face. "All right, kid, you win. Gonna play us a tune then?" "Want to hear a really sad one I wrote after my mum passed away?" "If that's what you want, be my guest." The lad started plucking the strings as if he were playing a harp. Then his voice, that was something else. He sang like an angel. Despite his usually deep voice, the lad brought up an octave like a girl's. Dave pasted on a watery smile as he listened to Frankie's words. Tears clogged his throat. "Mother, you always told me you'd be here, whatever life would throw at us, but now, you've gone away, left me on my own, 'cause now I'm losing Dad too. Why couldn't we see a doctor or a nurse or anyone to help us through it? 'Cause we're dirty poor beyond belief, homeless, and I'm in grief." After the song, Frankie put the guitar on his bed and sobbed. Dave tried to hold in tears, be brave, but he joined the young man and held him in his embrace until they both shook with tears for all the shite life had dealt them. He'll protect the lad. He'll pull some strings, get a computer engineer to make an apprentice of him. Then, maybe one day, the lad could find a decent woman and have kids, something they denied an agent like him, or should he say, a terrorist like him, because that was the truth of it. Dave stared at 2 wooden chairs and an empty desk in the senior sergeant's office as he waited for the political commissar. The door creaked open and he pivoted to salute. The stout man was shaped like a barrel and his curly black hair bunched out from the rim of his skull cap. "Good day to you, David Flynn." "Good day, Commissioner Willis." Dave clasped his hands behind his back and smiled down at the man. He must have been mixed race because while he had Mayleedian yellow eyes, like Dave and Frankie, his skin wasn't snow white, but the colour of the lightest flagstone. When Commissar Willis smiled, his square teeth gave away a lucky gap in the middle. Sit. No need to look so nervous. We're all communists. Women hold up half the sky and an officer is no better than Bob, Dick or Harry. He boomed with laughter as he rounded the desk and lowered himself into the wooden chair, making its frame creak under his bulky form. Dave sat too. "I won't keep you too long. The reason I wanted to get together is that Sergeant Scott was telling me about the beggar boy you've taken in." Dave straightened and nodded. "Yes." "He told me you rescued him from Sirius and CN. During your heroic attack on the capitalist enemies," he chuckled. "I hear you have a sparry cat under your wing too." "I do. I hope that's not a problem." The commissar waved off his concern. "Base 54, further south of here, has some sparry cat bitches if yours gets lonely." Dave's shoulders relaxed. "I'll talk to the lad about it. That would make an enjoyable day trip." Yes, the commissar rubbed his hands together. "That gets me straight to the point. You must train your boy up to follow your footsteps." Dave's posture became limp as if all the bones had dissolved away, leaving his skin. "The lad wanted to become some kind of computer engineer." No. "It makes perfect sense for your boy to follow you. Considering you're sharing a dormitory," he smiled. "A sparry cat, eh? Always wanted one of them, but me better half wouldn't allow that. Where is he now?" He gave him a tight smile. "In our apartment." He pulled a long face. "Ought to get him out for some fresh air. The boy too." He laughed at his joke. "They need plenty of runs. Never know. Might be able to train that sparry cat to catch some rabbits for the kitchen while the boy learns to handle a gun." Dave grimaced. "We already let the sparry cat out once a day." "Shame he doesn't live above ground with all the other animals. The lad loves him too much." "Fair enough. Well, why don't we see if we can let him outside of the compound?" "Outside?" "Sure. I'll see to it myself that the 3 of you get out more. You're not a prisoner." Engulfed with dread that night, Dave fell into a fitful slumber. Misery and regret filled his dream world. Finger on the trigger, Dave widened his stance against the recoil of his machine gun's propulsion and bared the deafening roar. His guts clenched and he spotted little kids in the mix at the shopping mall, so he aimed at the adults from the chest up. Leaving the little uns to cry and see their parents and grandparents explode under his rain of bullets did nothing to ease the pain. A force pulled him back from the scene, away from the Sky City and into the swirling red. The stench of blood and busted guts remained. Now he was a child, working the land, picking stones and scaring birds with his brothers and sisters. His heart clenched in his chest before the sound of planes came. He'd dreamed it so many times. "No!" His big brother Johnny stood with a great lump of stony clay in his hands. He grinned and his yellow eyes sparkled, so happy. "What's wrong, David? Ma's cooking mutton stew tonight." "You should be dead pleased." Whoo! The planes flew over, once, twice, 3 times. Dave's brothers and sisters screamed and scattered, running around the muddy field like a flock of headless chickens. Warm pee soaked his pants. Boom! White light. Deafness. "No!" he moaned, collapsed in the mud. He should never have survived. Death was too cruel not to take him also. Oshun awoke with a jolt as the spaceship's siren sliced through the atmosphere and pounded her eardrums. After forcing her gummy eyelids open with the little strength left in her face, she peered through a hole in her cryo-sponge. Across the way, Fran's face had frozen dead in horror and her bloody corpse levitated between her magnetic plates. A head-sized slug chewed into her neck as if she were a leaf. The creature's red colour intensified as it drained her remaining blood. When it crunched through her neck cord, Fran's head detached from her neck stump and levitated a few inches above it within the magnetic field. Bile burned the back of Oshun's throat. Her only friend, dead, killed by this thing. She lost track of spatial awareness until she saw another slug breaking into an egg on Fran's right. This creature was milky translucent, the same colour as the cryo-sponge. No doubt it would turn red too once it reached its target. It exposed the sleeping Awa, a Nerthling sax with beige skin and mousy hair. Oshun gasped for air and tried to move, but only her eyes could scan her dead and dying friends in the broken cryo eggs. She attempted to scream to no avail, paralysed and useless. Tentacles twitched, and a slug poked its head into the hole in Oshun's egg shell. As it consumed the gelatinous material, she tried to scream for help again, but her sound cords weren't working. Someone called out from the men's cryo lounge on the other side of the wall. Chonglin. "Can anyone get us out of these cryo eggs?" She waited for a few breaths. "A giant slug's eating me!" he screamed. The pain in her lungs increased with mounting terror. Powerless. Something crashed in the other lounge. She heard it behind the metal partitioning. She squinted at the creature and it stared back at her through red eye stalks. It opened its rubbery lips and hissed, exposing 4 rows of sharp teeth. As it crawled closer to the inside of Oshun's egg, it indulged on the cryo-sponge substance meant to sustain life in faster-than-light travel. The spaceship must have stopped or seriously decelerated for her to survive with a gaping hole in her cryo-egg, but the alarm continued to blare. Perhaps the ship was in peril and its paralysed occupants. The slug stretched its muscular foot across to her neck. Her insides quivered as it slithered down to her genitals and then the inside of her thigh. Without physical sensations, she watched in alarm as it chewed on her flesh. It must have been excreting acid because her tissue bubbled and sizzled under the touch of its jaw. She couldn't move, but that didn't stop her stomach from knotting up. "Can anyone hear me?" Chonglin begged and whimpered from next door. As the hole in Oshun's inner thigh grew deeper, blood spurted out like a high-pressure geyser. It didn't puddle on the floor but levitated in hundreds of bloody globules which joined to form larger ones. Her attempts to cling to life faded as she drifted into unconsciousness.